Well, all right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Mike Shaman, CEO of Gen City Labs. You have found your way into the bi-monthly, I think I got that right, LinkedIn Live with Gen City. As you may or may not be aware, we try to get together with various experts from brands and marketers in different industries to talk about topics that we think are impactful for brand marketers. This week, we have not only your fabulous Gen City Labs team with Mo Husseini, our Chief Design Officer, Eric Arvai, our Web3 strategist, MK, our Head of Marketing, but also joining us is Sal Burns, a social media marketer, expert, and former Meta employee. Sal, say hi, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello. Hi, everybody. I most recently spent about 8 years at Meta. And it was interestingly, when I joined, it was a small company at 10,000 people. And even though that doesn't sound small, it really felt small. It was super startup-y. Things changed rapidly, and most recently, obviously, it evolved into like a very grown-up company, lots more processes, and it's now about 60,000 people. So in my time at Meta, I worked on regional teams in marketing, and then moved to California about 6 years ago and spent time building out Messenger's business, helping monetize that, and then also market on data privacy. And so I've definitely spent time on multiple topics in tech, from the more relaxed to the significantly more intense. I'm really happy to be joining you guys today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. It's, as a marketer, Sal, most of the people watching know we are very deeply involved in the events space, right? We do everything from Super Bowls to festivals to trade shows and traveling tours. Social media over the years has become pretty critical to just about every interaction that we've built. When we got started, it used to be we need to find a way to allow people to post this to Facebook. We need to send them some takeaway that is socially shareable that they can amplify. Later, that grew into Insta. That more recently has grown into Twitter, TikTok, Snap. Name your platform of choice. What was it like when you first entered the space? How did you get started at Meta? And what was your role originally? And what was kind of the social media scene back then?
Well, my role in the scene are a bit different. I'll start with my role. I spent a decade at various creative agencies, sort of starting at account coordinator up to account director, and just worked with a bunch of different brands across mostly consumer B2C marketing. And I was at a digital agency. Meta became a client of that agency, and that's when I first got introduced to them. They were, a small collection of brilliant people moving really, really quickly, and it was very scrappy. And at the time, the ads business was pretty nascent, right? I mean, we were still selling likes, and it hadn't really evolved into advertising that drove particular outcomes for clients. And in the time I was there, obviously it evolved to be, an incredible performance driver and ROI driver for clients. And that was, as a result of lots of very smart pivots by the leadership team, and then just a bunch of hard work.
Right on. So I guess let me do a quick round robin with the team. As you guys, how have you seen? So if you don't know, by the way, for those of us joining live, and also for those of us may be listening to this remotely, MK used to play a big role in New York Comic Con, has also worked for Gartner on the B2B side of events. So MK, let me throw it over to you first, because you have both the kind of consumer and the B2B side. How have you seen social media utilization, and how did both the consumer side and the B2B side embrace the space?
Yeah. So first things first, I am the generation of people that entered when Facebook was launching and you needed a college email address to create an account. So I was very much used to thinking about those platforms from the really tight community point of view that they started as, really campus specific bubbles. And then you started bridging out your network to other campuses. But it was something very different then. And then it became news feeds, and then it became my mom watching what I was doing at college, and that got way less fun for a little while there. And then it sort of has circled back to being communities. I've seen it in different ways. I mean, Gartner was some of the first people that I watched use the LinkedIn Live function, hosting some interviews with their experts. And when you think about that, it's a different kind of community, but it's a broadcast. It's pulling people into a community. It's not as much of a dialogue. I think Meta has struck it a bit with the Facebook groups better than LinkedIn groups are doing. And so it started as community. It went off track a little bit, and I think it's back there.
Awesome. Mo, you, and for those of you guys that don't know Mo, a widely varied background, from working with Lucas Arts and Lucasfilm back in the day, through agency and events and a number of different roles. How have you seen the world of social media evolve as it, as it pertains to brand marketers and brand marketing strategies?
Wow.
I know that's a big question.
Let me start by saying, I guess I'm old, and so from that standpoint, I remember one of the first kind of engagements that I had with social was working for a very large, I guess I would call it old school tech company, like as in the origins of Silicon Valley kind of thing, and then trying to do a quote unquote viral video campaign, which was, hilarious as a notion, but their concern at the time, and this will show you kind of how far we've come, their concern at the time was, how can we put corporate content out on a platform where, and I quote, anybody can just comment on it, right? And this idea that anybody can comment on their content potentially negatively, or say, bad things about it or whatever, was very hard for the marketing team to wrap their head around, right? This idea of like, well, no. And it's funny, like in that case particularly, they decided to only release it on their own platform and have a link to it as a video, because they didn't want to be on YouTube, because that's the Wild West and anybody and their brother could be attacking their content. It's been interesting to go from that to watching people now build their brands entirely on social media, right? There are people who frankly only advertise on social media, a lot of the DTC brands, et cetera. And it's matured into being this thing where people understand that you get the good and the bad and all that other stuff. I'm particularly interested in this, Mike, and everyone on the GCL side, understanding kind of what happens with decentralization and, as we move into this world where at least people are trying experiments around the idea of letting people own their media in different ways, and what that does to social media. It'll be really interesting. I'm particularly interested in what happens with the Blue Sky protocol, not the platform, which I find execrable personally. That's just me. Sorry, I've got banging. I will mute.
That actually kind of leads me down a path. And Sal, I know during your time at Meta, you worked, it started off very much that Facebook, the platform, and that, moves into Insta and WhatsApp as well, but was about data mining, right? It was about harvesting user data, repackaging that up and selling it to advertisers. Back in the day, it was pretty much a free-for-all. right? They could grab every piece of data that they wanted. People, and consumers in general are very willing to give up data and data privacy in exchange for efficiency, in exchange for other forms of value, which is, I think kind of some of the things that fueled the growth was the ability to connect with others. And that was kind of the trade-off. Then you have governmental regulators getting involved and talking about data ownership and data privacy. What Mo alludes to with decentralization really kind of is what we're starting to see as the next phase. How did data privacy evolve from your early days through GDPR, through the California privacy rules? Sorry, I have a dog. Mo's got workers. How did you see that evolve? And then Eric, I want to talk with you because of your Brave browser focus and talk a little bit about what they're doing specifically. First, you.
Yeah, that's obviously a topic near and dear to my heart because I led a small team of marketers focused on that topic most recently. But I used to sort of call it the data Wild West, right? I think as the internet has sort of grown up and it's become clear, like, yep, tremendous value here. It's here to stay. Like we collectively have had to sort of work on some of those like big societal topics like bullying, like election integrity, like data privacy, and the internet's just humans online, but obviously it brings like some very different challenges. Yeah, when I started at Meta, data wasn't a topic. Like it wasn't a concern. I think that teams were responsibly using data, but it hadn't entered the sphere as like a real focus at that point. But obviously, it was a competitive differentiator for the platform. As governments got involved and as Apple made platform changes, it changed the business. Fortunately, AI, I think also as the algorithms got smarter and like needed less input, that's really helped. But for brands, for marketers, I mean, you've had to shift from like, here's my privacy policy. It's 75 pages long. Like, just click yes if you want my thing, and people just click yes. To, well, like a real relationship online where like I have ABC data. I do because you've given it to me and you're okay with that, and I'm using it in ABC way. And so I think that's probably like the shift to mobile was really hard, but I think the shift to like using data as an indicator of a relationship online is infinitely harder. And in my last couple of years at Meta, there were definitely some advertisers and brands that were leaning in and like really starting to do this well. But it's so complex because like data is spread across so many different silos and in every part of your organization. And so really getting a handle on how to use it respectfully, I say is like for sure the next frontier of marketing.
Right on. Yeah, it's. Oh, go ahead, Mo. You're muted though.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. Sorry. I was going to say, you mentioned that some people were doing it right, like not to name names, but what is it that they were doing that was right in terms of how at least they were approaching it or thinking about it?
So it's a mentality, right? You go from, oh, I've got this amazing treasure trove of data from all these people. Like, how can I blast them with marketing? To, oh, this is data that I need to like respect and figure out exactly why I got it and what I'm allowed to use, not allowed, but what I'm consented to use it for. And actually thoughtfully design like a re-engagement strategy with people so that the data you have, like people actually want you to use it, and for A, B, and C purpose. And so it was more of a mentality thing, Mo, than anything. But it really the only companies that really started to make traction were the ones that said, okay, well, I'm going to need a tiger team of people from every single part of my organization, like through to finance, right? And figure out like what is our shared vision for data respect and data management, and what does that mean? And pull consultants in and work with folks at Meta, et cetera. But yeah, mentality shift, big time.
It's a great segue, E, for you, because I want to talk a little bit about there's a more recent entrant to the privacy universe, and move a little bit away from social and into the browser, because I think that a lot of people, and actually the changing habits of consumers means that they're getting more information, more product recommendations, from social media platforms, and they're really using those as their search functions, as opposed to using classic Google search or Bing, if you're a Bing person. But there's also, opportunities in the space, opportunities to disrupt. And I think we had a conversation recently with the folks from Brave Browser. If you guys aren't familiar with Brave Browser, it's an alternative to Chrome, Firefox, or Edge or Safari. And E, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, because you have been a Brave Browser person for a while, and its number one purpose for being is consumer data privacy and protection.
Yeah, so it's definitely a privacy first. In other words, all of the settings are opt out by default, and very sort of secure in terms of how your data is either sold or stored. I was initially drawn to it because of a a more overt relationship between myself, the consumer, and my window into the internet, my browser. And there is a kind of a overt transaction that happens with Brave Browser. You are rewarded for viewing or engaging with ads. There's no nothing is necessarily hidden from the user. You choose to or you choose not to engage, and you are rewarded for that with a what's called their basic attention token. And so, in other words, the value that I, as a consumer and user, and just general browser of the internet, am essentially getting some value back for the data that I'm actually creating. And that's true whether I'm on a particular social media platform or I'm just browsing an e-commerce site, because it's built into the browser itself. I have complete control over what I am, the data that I am creating, again, where it's stored and what I'm getting back for that. And so that value exchange, I see kind of moving a little bit more towards the users, whereas I think probably 10 or 15 years ago, it was definitely all that value was getting kind of aggregated by, for the most part, social media platforms that were then, of course, selling that back to us in the form of advertising. So it's an interesting shift. And I think, Sal, you had mentioned earlier about, two things. One was this thoughtfulness about how the data is actually used, and I love that, and I want to I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And then the other piece was kind of this idea that you have a like sorry, this like I lost a train of thought for a second. I'm so sorry.
All right, I'll pick it up
Please
for
do,
you,
yeah.
because we've taken little pieces of what Mo was saying about decentralization.
Yeah.
What you are talking about the empowerment of consumers, right?
Yeah.
And about the transparency, like hyper transparency, that Brave is creating. And Sal, back over to you. How did knowing that this is a changing landscape, a changing environment? How did that alter the way that your relationship with advertisers developed over years? And when you even up to this year, right, in early 23, how does that get us to where we're at today? And if you can talk about that first, about how it used to be, which, as Mo said, might just be people shotgunning money into social media to get impressions, right? Into a very careful and meticulous approach. How did that change the relationship of advertisers to the platforms and their perception of the platforms?
I mean, privacy, I'll start with Apple, right? Privacy is in their stated DNA. I think they did an incredible job of timing their strategic marketing play on privacy. They did it at a moment where they knew they were controlling a certain amount of data flow. Obviously, Meta's apps, until Oculus, are all on devices, and so there's a challenge that the business has just for that fact. But Apple, I think, and obviously others, the press included, privacy became sort of like it's either all the privacy or zero privacy, and certain platforms had to sort of decide, well, what side of the argument are we on? And advertisers are just kind of caught in the middle, going, wait, what? this is disruptive. It can't totally be true. And hey, advertising industry, like, please figure this out, because this isn't really this isn't helping us. Like, we've come to rely on these digital platforms to drive ROI. And like, in some cases, I mean, there's some pretty great stories of small businesses who like never would have existed had the data not been involved to help them find new customers. So it was sort of like advertisers were sort of caught going, figure it out. Meta was caught going, well, we need to rebuild our ad stack, because when it was built, it wasn't built for the kind of data thoughtfulness that I talked about. It wasn't built to be able to say, hey, in this country, data can be used this way, in this country, data can be used that way. So, my team and the product teams that we supported worked to basically rebuild that advertising stack. And I think that what we saw play out was advertisers sort of pause and say, well, what can we do in the meantime? Lots of really thoughtful test and learn strategies came out from various agencies. And now I think we're starting to see like what is sort of the new normal, which is there's going to continue to be more testing. The browser you described, Eric, is a good example of a company saying, no, we believe this is what people want. Other companies are saying, well, actually, no, maybe companies should choose. And I think like the same way, privacy is like not a one flavor thing for humans. Like what I am comfortable sharing is not going to be necessarily what like Mo, you're comfortable sharing. I think that's how it's eventually going to play out on the internet. And I think like the brands that realize that that's actually going to be the case, so like try not to jump into one boat or the other, are the ones that will be best positioned for the future.
I think there's something super interesting about you guys on the West Coast, though. It was only when I came to visit Shaman at one point and saw the billboards for Apple and some other brands, like buying billboards straight up about privacy policies, like calling a lot of attention to the moves they were making. I mean, me out in the suburbs on the East Coast, it's not the same conversation, and brands aren't leading with that message as much. I think I'm getting it because we're working in the tech and marketing space, but we're still very early on the consumer awareness of their opportunities here. I think they are aware of times when they maybe felt things got too invasive, but I don't know that there's an awareness of empowerment or choice beyond reject cookie.
Well, and to your point, like I do not, as a consumer, want to be in a position where I'm having to answer all sorts of questions about privacy. Like, I think it's business's responsibility to make reasonable choices. But you're totally right, MK. It was an ad tech topic, not like a general consumer topic. Apple was definitely trying to push it into that territory.
Can I jump in quickly, because I'd love your opinion on this, and I find this very interesting, completely on a sociological level, which is what people think about privacy. Because I look at, I'm firmly Gen X, right? Like I look at my cohort, and there are definitely concerns about privacy, and they exist, and they're very real. And I have idiot friends who I will not refer to by name, but like who won't even do the fast track on their cars because I don't want people tracking where I'm crossing the bridge or whatever. And don't get me started. But I look at my son, for example, and him and his entire friend group share their locations constantly. They all know where each other are. Like my son will grab his phone and go, oh, blah, blah, blah. They're all down here. And the notion for me of all my friends just being able to like open an app and track exactly where I am or what I'm doing or who I'm hanging out with is terrifying. But I think that there's significant shift in what people actually consider private or not private, right? Like, and I think the very definition of the word privacy itself is changing, and what people care about or don't care about is changing. And I think your point, Sal, about how people use the data is really more the salient one than whether, because the data exists. Whether we like it, you don't like it, whatever. Whether you put the tracker in your car or not, they know where your car is, right? Like they've got license plate trackers, they've got cameras, like blah, blah, blah. It's what people do with the data. Earlier last year, we were doing a lot of work around kind of data privacy and social networks and stuff like that. And one of the things we kept talking about was like, how do you remove the ick out of data, right? Like take my data and use it in a way that makes my life better. I'll give you all the data in the world. It doesn't matter to me. But if you start being a little creepy, it's like, why do you know this about me? Like, why are you talking to me in this way? That's where it kind of like jumps the shark. And I'd love your perspective on what you see there.
Well, and that's why it's so hard, because like there are creepy people in the world, there are bad actors, and so this is just like society playing out online. All right, I love the example of your son, because the reason you have that reaction is probably because you're like, well, ooh, hold on, maybe I don't like all my friends, or something else. But when that's available now, I have like my husband and my best friend in my location tracker, and that's really cool because I can be like, oh, she's running late again. And so it's just a natural evolution of this new technology, which is now pervasive in developed countries, and our ability to understand the good that they can the thoughtfulness they can add to our life, the utility they can add to our life, and just make decisions that like your own decisions about how you want to use those capabilities. The ick factor is exactly, and that's part of the problem, is businesses don't yet treat data with the same thoughtfulness that they will eventually will. It's a competitive advantage right now, to be able to lean in and say to your customers, like, we have your data because you shopped in our store, and we're using it to send you ABC. Do you want us to keep doing that? Unsubscribe links should be at the top of emails. You should be making it really, really easy for people to decide whether they want to engage with you or not.
So, and actually, let me reset the room real quick. Thank you for everybody who's joining us live, currently on LinkedIn Live and YouTube and Twitter and wherever else we are simulcasting and broadcasting. This is Gen City Labs. We do this every couple of weeks, and our topic is social media this week, and our guest is Sal Burns, formerly of Meta. So we've talked a little bit about where we were. We've been talking a little bit about where we are. Let's talk about where we're going. I think we've touched on some trends very lightly of consumer empowerment and decentralization. I think another important one that should probably be a part of the conversation is digital identity. And the Gen City Labs team has heard me talk about this ad nauseum, but we've watched digital identity go from your pictures of pets and family and dinners and vacations on Facebook and Insta, through the flex of the things you own, through the kind of egocentric posts that people are doing. And now we see that evolving, and part of your digital identity is not just how you're representing yourself on social media as an individual. We see Web3 as a part of that, with the things you own and the digital assets, and kind of the trend that is happening with the ownership of digital assets. We see that evolving with this trend of decentralization, the fact that centralized entities like the social media platforms had so much power that they could essentially write their own rules. And along with that, we've talked a little bit about platform dependency, which Sal touched on, because Facebook is a little bit at the mercy of Apple, because that's how half of their users access their app, right? And that goes on to developers in the Meta ecosystem are dependent on Facebook for keeping their terms of service correct and for not making crazy changes on them after they've been building. So all of that said, and knowing that the changing consumer consumption habits are having a very significant impact on brand marketers as well, where do we go from here? Where do you think we end up in 3 to 5 years from a platform perspective, from a consumer habit perspective? And what are some of the most important things that brand marketers need to be aware of so that they can start planning and getting ahead of the game? I will start with Mo, because I know, Mo, you always have some thoughts on upcoming social media trends. So let's do a little round robin. Mo, we'll start with you.
Yowza. I have no idea. Honestly, I think it's the Wild West. I mean, I really do. I think watching Elon perform the world's greatest bonfire of value has been, extremely impressive. I didn't think anybody on the planet, and my apologies, Sal, if I'm offending previous employers, but I didn't think anyone on the planet could make Zuckerberg look cool. And yet somehow Elon has managed to do it. Because the pissing matches over on Threads and Twitter have been amazing. I really am super interested to see what happens with decentralization. I'm super interested to see what happens with identity in the context of social media. I think that there's definitely a push for privacy in the Web3 space, but at the same time, there's a push for greater transparency around actors so that you know who you're talking to and what they're saying and all that other stuff. And I think that there's a coming collision there, right? Like we want more privacy, but I also, I'll talk about myself. When I engage with people on social media, if you've got a little standard image instead of like the weird avatar that you get on the social media platform, and you've got some weird name that doesn't imply your actual name, I'm less likely to engage with you. I just don't view you as a meaningful actor personally. That may change. I'm just interested in what the culture is going to do with things. I think for marketers, it's a really interesting space. I think how people kind of curate their own profiles is going to be really interesting. Like, when you own your own data, if decentralization happens, which I hope it does, that kind of stuff will be. I love Sal's framing about it being kind of about the culture, right? Like the internet is just the culture online, and I think that the culture is a mess right now. For all kinds of reasons, right? Like I don't mean that as a political statement. I think there's a lot of different things happening in the world that are coming to a head, and I think we're seeing all of that reflected online. And coming out the other side will be interesting. That Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times." I think we're all cursed. So sorry, it's not as deep and meaningful as you might have wanted.
I mean, I think the reality is, like, you hear a lot of companies talk about interoperability, right? So we're going to, Meta was going to make it easy for you to have your own identity on all of the various platforms. I mean, the government is ultimately the one who would sort of have to get involved here, and they are and they aren't. But I think the big companies are always going to do what is best for them. They're responsible to their shareholders, and so we're not, I don't think, going to see the kind of identity that's like fluid across platforms. But what I am starting to see more of is people pulling in all of their various handles across all the social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, and be more comfortable saying, like, this is my profile here, this is my profile here, and that's good. And I think like the platforms continue to allow unique expression across those, because my LinkedIn photo looks different than my Insta photo, and that's fine. I think the brands are just going to have to realize that they're going to have to continue to play in all of these various spaces and test on the platforms that they think are delivering the most value, knowing that there's going to continue to be some just a little bit of a lack of clarity on exactly how they can reach like one person across all of these platforms and know that they're able to do that reliably. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
I think, I mean, to jump in before I kick it over to MK and Koa, I think that we are going to be living in a future of zero party data where individuals have enough agency to control all of the data that they are generating when they turn on their computer or mobile device, and also have the ability to figure out how to monetize that or how to exchange value, whether that's an outright sale or whether that's providing access to that data for some other benefit. I see a world in which that happens, along with, the advent, and Sal, you touched on AI earlier, AI improving the ability to instantly respond and adapt to every individual. So you have this world of hyper personalization where you can reach out to an individual consumer with a high likelihood of buying, as opposed to, Coca-Cola with an ad buy that says I'm going to hit 700,000 women aged 35 to 44. Like, instead, you're going to say, I need this very, very specific demographic, and customized messages generated to almost each individual. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in the next year, but I don't think it's that far off. You look at the power that AI has to take massive data sets and analyze them and provide instantaneous insights. And once that's refined to a point, I think that's going to change just about everything. So then it'll be up to individual consumers to share their own information and to decide on what they're willing to provide in exchange for value. And that value can be convenience, right? Like I am a consumer of LaCroix, right? Fizzy water. And because of that, I'm open to other fizzy waters. And you know what? Let's find out what else is out there and let me get some coupons, or let me find out, let me do product discovery because of it. I think that sort of stuff is going to be coming down the pipe. So MK, I'm going to throw it over to you and talk about trends. Where do you see the wonderful world of social media and the platforms living in the next few years?
Yeah. So we did a little bit of a poll on Twitter before launching this Spaces, and we asked people kind of what they were excited about on trends. And there's definitely an appetite for creative content. I think we're seeing like great storytelling. In my MBA classes, we were talking about Elise Myers and how captivating her use of storytelling and a personal connection with her audience and adding little gifts. She went viral because of a story about a first date with tacos, and she used gifts in her story like no one had ever seen before, and suddenly it became an element that was unique to her content. And so I think there's a lot on the frontier for adapting content for this format. Like, it kind of mirrors Netflix creating those interactive stories and games and stuff like that. They never really assumed your remote or your controller or your phone was in your hand while you were watching the content, but now they're acknowledging it and building content accordingly to those behaviors. So I'm excited to see how content develops. And I'm also curious to see how many entries there can be in the market. To Sal's point about, what all your different profiles combined look like. I have downloaded a few social apps, be it Blue Sky or Saturday is one I tested out because it's geographic based networking, like LinkedIn, but hyper local. And I just forget they exist. So I'm so curious. At Threads, installed it, forgot about it instantly. I just don't know how anyone else will enter and add value in a way that actually disrupts and unthrones any of the existing platforms.
Can I jump in right there? Because I feel like, these private social networks already have, as MK was just describing, that big network effect. They have the most traffic, they have the most value, they have the most data. And it's really hard to kind of break free of that. You had mentioned Threads, Mo, you'd mentioned Blue Sky a little bit earlier. And I think, if we are to have our digital identity be interoperable. Sal, as you had mentioned about interoperability earlier, that really struck me as, in order for my digital identity to be interoperable, does that mean that, there has to be a central body that creates a protocol that allows me to port my digital identity across the different platforms on the internet? And is that sort of the enemy of decentralization, which I believe so strongly in? If you think about the origins of even the email protocol, SMTP, or the reason that the internet is open, because there was a time when it might not have been. In fact, if Bill Gates at one point had gotten his way, it would have been a private thing rather than having TCP/IP, this sort of open protocol that allowed platforms to build on top of it. And in that time, we were able to give up a little bit of some personal data, some personal freedom, not freedom, but personal data. But we didn't have to be a developer in order to have a website. We could go to Facebook and we could have our own space on the internet that we could connect with others, so on and so forth. But we gave up data because we didn't have to sort of build that ourselves. But it was all made possible.
Saying you could have my own space, my space.
Oh yes, you must have been.
That same thing went through my mind
back in the day.
See what you did there.
That's right.
See,
I was in
come
front
on.
of Tom. I'm right there with you. But yeah, so the idea that, how can we create a certain, layer that's open to everybody to build on, and yet still maintain that interoperability, maintain that digital identity, and to me, decentralization is probably the best pathway there. But how do we get all these people on these private social networks onto something else that, might have more freedom to transact value, more sort of control of our own digital identity? I don't know if that's going to be the trend, because we talked about earlier, it comes down to giving up data, or in some cases security, for convenience, and we all do it, giving up our location data so that I can find my kid. I know he's at school right now, thank God. But that the idea that porting over all of those big networks into a different space that's more decentralized, I think is going to be a huge challenge, but one that I think would be more ideal and more open, and I think better for culture and society in general.
Yeah, I mean, not to make this political, but if you look at how we function just, physically, right? We have all sorts of innovation happening with smaller companies. We have large, very well established companies, and the government has put rules in place to sort of allow that to continue. I think what we're seeing now is governments are still trying to understand, wait, how do people make money on the internet? I mean, especially in America, in parts of Europe, so much further ahead. But there is going to need to be comprehensive legislation to create that type of freedom, Eric, that you described, which will make society better.
If you hadn't noticed, Sal, Eric is a decentralization evangelist / true believer / idealist.
You can see it in my eyes.
I'm over here in the cynicism, capitalist camp of things. I'll be honest. I think, in a lot of ways, my big problem with a lot around decentralization is the bad actor factor, and the reality that there's no backstop, and the conversations or debates that Eric and I have had over the past year or so around this will go on, I'm sure, for years, because I think fundamentally that there are a lot of things that people are willing to give up, but the thing that they draw the line at tends to be security, however you define that, whether that's financial security, whether that's physical security, whether that's online security, whether that's data security. I think that's where people get icky around things. It's not so much I don't think people fundamentally care, the average person, not Eric, but fundamentally care who's holding their data, whether it's Facebook or Google or whatever. I think they just care that it's being used in a way that is net additive to their lives, right? You can have We have many machines throughout our house that respond to the word Alexa that I don't want to say because it'll trigger. But I'm always entertained by how like incredibly bad some of its contextual prompts are. Like it'll be like, "Hey, do you want me to read this to you right now?" And it's like, "What would make you think that?" And thank you for interrupting this conversation. Like, I do hope that data and the algorithm actually get better, right? I would love. Apple is particularly good at it. When you like pick up your phone and get in the car, and as soon as you get in the car, it goes like, "Hey, you're probably heading to pick up your kid. Do you want directions there?" Because it's looked at what I do every day at around 3:15 or whatever the heck it is. Like, I don't find that even slightly intrusive, right? Like it doesn't creep me out at all. But Alexa just jumping in the middle of a conversation I'm having with my wife to remind me that, "Hey, would you like to play a game about why are you doing this?" It feels like really intrusive and weird. And I just think that I look forward to the algorithm getting better and our data feeding it even more and making my life easier, frankly. Sorry, Eric.
No offense taken.
Personal responsibility is a bitch. And I think that in general, Mo, I land towards your side. It's nice when somebody is there to help you recover a password. In Web3, a big tenet of Web3 is you own everything, including you own the responsibility to protect your own assets and digital identity.
Say hello to Mark Cuban.
Oh,
yeah, right. Mark Cuban, who just got hacked for $870,000, right? Like, it is a very big challenge. There are lots of bad actors in the space, and that makes it really hard for mainstream audiences who are very used to being able to recover a password by simply, two-factor authenticating or sending the note over, to receiving that. So when you think about identity and identity theft, right now we just think of that as somebody took my credit card number, right? In the future, identity theft as they have my pictures, they have my social media, they've established a new identity as me, and now they're representing themselves as me. I know that's happening a little bit, but when all of this is tied together under one roof, there is a very significant risk there. And I think that, that'll be interesting to see play out. I don't have a great answer for where we're going to end up there.
But look,
we're coming.
Sorry. No. I was just going to say, like,
no.
Like, I think this goes into the notion of AI, right? Like, and starting to get to some A, very creepy things, but B, very cool things at the same time, right? Like, being able to have your personal assistant sound like somebody by having feeding it enough of their language so that you're not just talking to Alexa, you're talking to your dad or your mom, whatever, right? Like, there's
Lou Ferrigno.
I don't want that. That would sound very strange. But I think there's something really cool happening in the space, right? But by the same token, every cool thing has a way to distort it into something effed up. I know, like, someone was saying that people are leveraging AI, particularly with people who have a lot of kind of social media out there, to create phone calls where it sounds like your grandkid is calling and needs help or money or whatever because they're stranded. And it's not real. It's a script that a voice, so they're lifting their social media and creating a voice print and using that kind of stuff. That's only going to get worse. Like, the authenticity of content, I think, is another huge challenge for social media, right? Like, we saw it a little bit with, oh, look, it's Trump, getting perp walked or whatever. And it's like, nope, it's not. It's a Mid-Journey, photograph of a Trump mugshot, or, the Pope wearing Prada was another great one. But I don't know how we are going to deal with authenticity of content, right? Like, when it gets, I started working for Lucas, and back when I started, it took thousands of hours and, hundreds of people to make a dinosaur, go running down a muddy path in the rain chasing a Jeep. Now it seems like you can, type in, backslash imagine dinosaur chasing Jeep. And, like, there you go. You just got one. That's kind of amazing, but like the leveraging of that for ill is going to be an interesting space. I will shut up
well,
now.
let's transition over from the negative into the positive. We're about to wrap up. For those of you guys that have been listening live, we very much appreciate your time and attention. For those of you guys listening on recording, we thank you guys as well. We do this every couple of weeks. We're Gen City Labs. Please don't forget to connect with Sal, by the way. She's awesome. And you can follow her on LinkedIn. There's a QR code to connect with her directly. Add her and go get it done. So lightning round, last thing on the list. Let's talk about what we are excited about. 30 to 60 seconds each about what makes us believe in a bright and fuzzy and wonderful future in the world of social media for brand marketers specifically, not just for society at large, but let's hone in on what should brands be excited about, what developments have occurred over the last few years or will occur in the next couple of years that we think are going to be major opportunities and really exciting things. Sal, we're going to start with you. What gets you excited about social media in the future?
Just the return to basics. Like there's been so much tech and ability to personalize, but it's actually started feeling like we're not personalizing and you're being bombarded. So I'm excited for marketers to think about like the individual people or the tight groups of people and what their mindsets, fears, hopes, desires are, and just lean into that, no matter whether in social media or anywhere, really.
All right, MK, over to you.
I feel like my answer layers onto that, and I add the word empowerment for the brands, for those social media people to adapt the voice to fit the platform, adapt the message to resonate with the audience. For brands that haven't been agile on social yet, they're getting left in the dust, while brands that are out there in the front, Steakums, Wendy's, the ones who have clearly loosened the reins and let those social communities thrive in the voice and the tone that they want to exist in. I think that's where it's going to get really fun and exciting for brands to show their personality and values.
Awesome. Koa, Eric Arvai, what do you got?
I'm excited that the monologue is turning into a dialogue. I've mentioned this on other shows, but I think as brands create more content, more in digital assets, for example, creating pods of owners, creating pods of focus groups, that they're getting instant feedback on experimenting with new products and new ways to express who they are as a brand.
Awesome. Mo, over to you.
Oh, wow. Hey, look, I'm excited to be alive. No, I mean that. No. I mean that in the best possible sense of the word. I think that, there's a lot that's really exciting right now in terms of, hello. I don't know who that is with Sal. Hi. I'm super I'm super excited that we are kind of in experimentation mode, right? Like there's a lot that's going on right now in terms of the digital world that reminds me of, once again, showing my age, of the early days of the internet when people were doing all kinds of dumb stuff that, you would look at it and go like, I can't believe they think that this is a business. And lo and behold, it wasn't a business. But by the same token, a lot of things that seemed really crazy became businesses that became like, earth-shaking businesses, frankly, right? And there's that statistic about the Fortune, the Fortune 100 or whatever the heck it is, and how quickly things cycle through that. I think I think a lot of really goofy companies out there doing really goofy things are potentially the next Apples or Facebooks or whatever. And it's really cool to kind of be alive in that and watch, dumb and amazing things happen at the same time, because I think they all feed each other. So. That's what I'm excited about.
Way to taint your vision of the future with a hint of cynicism. That's what I like. I like it. I knew it wouldn't be any other way, Mo. So for me, I will say I am very, very excited about the coming waves of creative content. Everybody is a content generator, with every human on the planet posting up stuff. That means brands have got to be on point. You know, MK, you touched on this. Sal, you touched on this a little bit. Like, they've got to be really goddamn good to be able to break through the noise. Like, really, really good. And that just means that things should, while there's gonna be a lot of noise and it'll be hard to break through, the stuff that does should be absolutely exceptional, and it should be really, really well done. And I think that, you know, given how challenging it's going to be, you know, the bold and the brave and the beautiful will survive, and you know, the cream will rise to the top.
Okay, so wait, question, follow up on that. Is meme maker a job? Or should it be?
God damn it. It's like the one part I'm not, yes, it probably should be. The power, memes are like unstoppably powerful. They're, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words, memes probably worth 10,000. Like, they're just a de facto way to communicate so many thoughts and feelings and emotions that, yeah.
If there was only some way to wrap ownership in like a little piece of software that the meme maker could extract value.
I can't get you guys to stop talking about NFTs for 1 hour. You guys are out of control.
I will point out that you're the one who said the word, MK.
I know. I stand away.
I said memes. He's bringing it to NFT.
But you're the one who said NFT.
It's a drinking game.
He was only
hinting at it. Next time we'll play.
Awesome.
Fine.
Well, once again, thank you, everybody who joined us live. Thank you if you're listening to this at some other point. We are Gen City Labs. Our special guest, Sal Burns. Thank you very much for joining us for this hour,
Plus her awesome child.
Oh, yeah.
And Sophie, we appreciate you too. Way to go. We will see you all back in 2 weeks. Do we have a topic for 2 weeks?
It's going to be 3 weeks. We're going to push to October 11th because I'm getting married and can't do this from my wedding.
How dare you? Live from the altar.
So we'll go live on the 11th. We have invited our friends from Brave Software. So if they confirm for the 11th, we'll do that then. If not, we're going to be talking a little bit about some predictions for South by Southwest next year. So we have a couple of different topics floating around for our next one. And as soon as we lock that in, we'll invite it and share it out to our networks.
Awesome. Thank you once again, everybody. We appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Sal. It was a pleasure to meet you.